some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
So, if we remember where we'd left off, very, very sadly, Paloma Shemirani had died, and Kay Shemirani had been on the Richie Allen show to explain her side of the story, where she claimed that essentially the treatment by the NHS was flawed. She didn't think she had cancer of any type. She felt that there was some other people that could have treated her, and she felt that Paloma died when she was given an overdose of adrenaline by a paramedic who injected her directly into the bone with a type of sort of gun as opposed to sort of a needle. And this is what she said on the Richie Allen show. And we pointed out in the last episode that there were certain things that had not been fully answered, like why was she doing Gerson if she didn't actually have cancer, as Kay claimed? Like, if she knew all these people in these clinics in Iran and Germany and wherever she said Mexico, and she felt that the NHS diagnosis wasn't correct, why didn't she go to one of those clinics and get another diagnosis? Why did Paloma weigh so little, less than 6 stone? What caused her to go into the heart failure that required CPR, that required Kay to call the NHS? Why did she call the NHS if she didn't trust the NHS? These were all questions that were raised, and there may well be answers to those, because it was only a very short interview with Richie. Now, Richie Allen is somebody that we both kind of know, don't we? Like, you know, I used to actually be a relatively regular guest on Richie Allen's show, but not anymore. And just in case anyone's wondering, what happened was basically in sort of 2020, when was it? 21, 22? October 2021. I was still sort of in the conspiracy world at this point, but I wasn't sort of getting on with a lot of people. I'd severed ties with Iconic by this point, and I was mostly rowing with people on podcasts. But Neil, that's what you do all the time anyway. Yes, well, you know, but I was doing it on podcasts anyway. So I'd written a series of articles basically debunking all the sort of COVID conspiracies, which are actually out on our podcast. They're I forget where they are, but basically go and look at them. And my contention as well was that the government wasn't actually trying to lock everybody up and microchip them, that they're actually trying to promote herd immunity, and basically didn't really give a shit about people. Anyway, I wrote a series of articles and I sent them to Richie, basically saying, like, let me come on your show and talk about this. And Richie answered, said, "Hey, Neil, I read that, mate. It was very well written. I see things a bit differently, and I'm happy to debate you anytime you are free to come on with me. I have loads of availability next week. Hope all's well." And so I responded, "A debate sounds like a competition. How's about a friendly chat? Lol. Did you get a chance to read the herd immunity article too? What did you think?" Richie responded, "I only ever have friendly chats with my guest, Neil. I did read the herd immunity article. Like I said, very well written pieces, but I see things differently. It would make for a good 40 to 45 minute chat. Let me know if you can come on next week." And then a couple of days later, I respond, "Hi, mate. Sorry, I got mega snowed under at work this week. Next week is probably better for me if that's okay with you, man." And I didn't get a response. So I sent another one, just basically explaining. So there's 2 articles, by the way. There's the herd immunity one, which details the source of the COVID downplaying is actually the HM Treasury and Nudge Unit and Tory donors. And the second article that explains the misconceptions seeded by these groups. This is the third article, and so I sent him the third article that I'd done. And he still doesn't respond. The third one is about basically Cambridge Analytica. And then he finally responds and says, "Neil, you keep sending me articles, yet you won't accept an invite on the show. I don't get you. I'd like you to have you on for a good old-fashioned debate. Name the day, mate." And so I politely point out that I was waiting for you to come back to me. The last thing I said was, hi, mate. Sorry, I got mega snowed under at work this week. Next week is probably better for me if that's okay with you, man. I didn't want to hector you. Then I just sent you the iterations of my 3 articles as they came out. Lol, obviously cross wires. By the way, are you okay? Because I saw that you weren't feeling well. The last 2 have basically been MP3s of me reading the articles as they're pretty long. Anyway, I'd love to come on and chat. In that regard, have you seen that Liz Truss has recently been using Simon Dolan's private jet at the expense of the taxpayer? Then I sent him another one a couple of days later saying, let me know when you're feeling better. And he never read those responses. You can see on Skype where basically somebody has bothered to read a response, and he never bothered to read them, which is just strange, to be quite honest. So, yeah, I sent him a message saying, next week's good for me. And he came back to me and said, why do you keep sending me articles? Why are you not saying when you can come on the show? And then he never bothered to check another response that I sent him. Strange. Anyway, now you got in touch with Richie Allen recently too, didn't you?
I did when we did our Manchester podcast. I actually tweeted him publicly and said that, we would be interested in coming on his show and discussing our evidence. Would he like me to send him the full series so he can listen to it?
Yeah.
And then have us on. And yeah, he DM'd me. Hi, Brent. Thanks for the tweet. I haven't heard your series. It looks interesting. I'd have to find time to listen to it first. I'd be very interested in you coming on yourself to discuss your personal experiences regarding conspiracy rabbit holes, if you like. You could promote the podcast during our conversation. Let me know if it interests you. And to be fair, I didn't even reply back because
that's not what
I said straight from the get-go, I want to come on, as some dare call it conspiracy, and I want to discuss Manchester. At that time I was saying I'm not going on any conspiracy shows to talk about my past. My past isn't up for debate.
No.
I don't do that.
I don't quite see how that would be useful on the Richie Allen show anyway, to be quite honest. Because basically he'd be going like, well, I don't understand that. And you'd be going, well, I used to be like you, but my opinion's changed. And that would be the way the conversation ended. So
pretty much,
like
I feel like he was just wanted to come on so that he could try and own me. So they all just want to do that. They just, let's own the ex-conspiracy guy.
Yeah, this is what I thought as well. So anyway, basically, that's why we've never been back on the Richie Allen show. Anyway, so Gabriel Shemirani, he responded. He'd evidently seen this interview or been told about it, and he responded to Richie on Twitter. And he said, Richie, Kate's lies thus far. Oriana, who I'm presuming is his other sister, was removed from Kay's care age 16 by social services. Her school, the Judd School, Tonbridge, was well aware of this. Contact them. 2. Sebastian never abused any siblings because in the show, Kay said that Sebastian was basically a crazy man that had attacked his brother and sisters, and they'd had to call the police. And then he says, which is interesting, we have proof that Kay wrote Paloma's statement. And this might be a statement that was sent to the court, or it might be a statement regarding the accusation that Anda, her boyfriend, sexually assaulted her, which, again, we're going to come on to both of those things shortly. Well, actually, we won't really discuss the court case because the court case was simply that. The brothers were trying to get custody of, or some sort of authoritative oversight, because for some reason Kay had named herself, given herself power of attorney, or Paloma had allowed her to have power of attorney, which I don't quite understand why. There may well be a very reasonable explanation for that, but that does somewhat go against the idea that Paloma was making her own decisions. If you've got the power of attorney, I don't know how that would work, but it did strike me as I'm not entirely sure why you would need that from your adult daughter. Maybe there was some reason. I don't know. Anyway, so on response to are you going to go on the Richie Allen show as your right to reply? And Sebastian Shemirani says he seems like a useless small-timer. We'll stick to legitimate media. It's very telling that Kay interviewed with him but turned down being interviewed by the BBC to defend herself in the podcast and Panorama. Kay knows that unbiased media will show her true colours, so she only interviews with fringe fellow travellers. He then turns his attention to Jackie Devoy again. Sebastian tweeted to Jackie, "Hi, Jackie. Thanks for noting that you support Kay, her murder of Paloma, and the story that she has spun blaming the NHS. Are you willing to talk on the record about your support for Kay? What do you think about Kay beating Paloma until the week that she died and banning Paloma from seeing doctors and her friends and family? You can't make this right by you can make this right by helping us share the truth about Kay Shemirani. We're publishing all the evidence for you to see, or you can be another domino that falls." So the brothers are not happy. So what happens is that Kay goes a bit on the defensive, as you would expect, and she releases quite a long statement on Twitter. And it's a legal statement in response to defamatory reporting issued by Mrs. K. Alison Shemirani and Dr. Farimar Shemirani, parents of the late Paloma Scarlett Shemirani, 2000 to 2024. "We are the mother and the father of Paloma Scarlett Shemirani, a 23-year-old Cambridge graduate, Rhodian scholar, linguist, artist, and daughter of integrity and extraordinary courage. Our daughter died following a chain of gross medical failings, breaches of consent law, falsified medical records, and reckless emergency drug use that violated every protocol for her age, weight, and clinical presentation. We now address a serious matter. We're in possession of all of her medical and legal documents, a sworn and signed High Court statement by Paloma dated 28th of April 2024, declaring in her own words that she did not have a confirmed lymphoma diagnosis, was drugged without her consent with rasburicase, which is a high-dose steroids, was harassed and gaslit by parties seeking to force chemotherapy on her, rejected Maidstone Hospital's treatment as unlawful and traumatic. All histopathology reports, which confirm no definitive diagnosis of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. All blood results consistently showing no malignancy pattern, but instead inflammatory or ineffective markers ignored by clinicians. Full clinical notes, nursing entries, drug charts, and email evidence showing unlawful treatment and coercion. A full copy of the post-mortem report, which was severely flawed and lacked toxicology, brain examination, or basic forensic integrity. Oh, so apparently the coroners are in it on this as well now. Paramedic records and EPCRs showing no cardiac arrest on arrival, but a massive overdose of adrenaline, 12 times her height weight appropriate dose. An additional paralyzing vasoconstrictive drugs that likely destroyed brain perfusion. And brain perfusion is liquid getting to the brain, basically. BBC Panorama and any other media outlet, if journalist or broadcaster has misrepresented our daughter's medical condition, suggested we influenced or endangered her life, published defamatory, false, or selectively edited content. Oh, that's ironic. Denied our daughter's full capacity, consent, and legal declarations, omitted her sworn legal statement, histology, or post-mortem evidence, then you are knowingly or recklessly publishing falsehoods. This is not journalism. This is state-sponsored propaganda designed to silence the truth of what happened to our daughter and reframe a preventable death as parental misconduct, despite overwhelming legal, medical, and forensic documentation to the contrary. We put you on notice. We are preparing formal complaints and legal action against any outlet or broadcaster, including BBC Panorama, who has disseminated false and harmful narratives. The doctors and NHS trusts involved in Paloma's treatment, who violated the Montgomery ruling, the Human Rights Act, and the Nuremberg Code. The coroner and associated legal professionals who attempted to conceal the real cause of death by suppressing key evidence, any regulators, lawyers, or reporters complicit in the coordinated attempt to reframe medical negligence and homicide as a family dispute in Paloma. I'm sorry if I'm reading this poorly, but there's just random capital letters. The punctuation is all over the fucking place. Like, to be fair, she has gone through quite a lot, so she's cross. In Paloma's honour, Paloma was never coerced. She was never radicalised. She was a woman of conviction and clarity. Her voice has been preserved, signed, sealed and submitted in her own hand. Okay, I don't wish to be picky, but her voice cannot be signed, sealed and submitted in her own hand. But anyway, and will now be shared with the world. We will not allow our daughter's memory to be defamed, nor her death to be sanitised. This statement and all supporting evidence will be sent to the BBC Editorial Complaints Unit, ipso Ofcom, the GMC, the Chief Coroner, the Home Secretary. The general public truth is no longer optional. You will all be held accountable. Miss K. Alison Shemirani, Dr. Paloma Shemirani, PhD, MSc, BSc Honours. Please read former post with Paloma's High Court sworn statement. And this is the sworn High Court statement. She also posted this. This is the sworn High Court statement of our beloved daughter Paloma Scarlett Shemirani, submitted on the 28th of April 2024 and sent to both her parents and her legal supporter. It was written in her own words with full capacity, courage and clarity. She was a Cambridge graduate, Rhodian scholar, former beauty queen, linguist and dress designer. She was confident, loving and principled and would be utterly betrayed by those who continue to lie about her after her death. She names doctors who drugged her without consent. She was clear. I do not want to be made infertile. I will not set foot in Maidstone Hospital again. Her voice will not be silenced. The public deserves the truth. And she posts this, which is a statement signed by Paloma. Growing up, natural healing and clean living was always our family's first port of call. For as long as I can remember, healthy living was always the case, though it intensified and became more important after my mum had cancer in 2012. To watch my own mum overcome an incredibly deadly form of cancer with an all-natural protocol was to learn that conventional medicine certainly wasn't the only way out. In 2015-16, at age 15, I spent 3 weeks in Dr. Patrick Vickers' Gerson therapy clinic in Mexico. I loved how the kitchen staff had taken such a restricted diet and made it delicious. I also got to speak to patients about their cancers and other illnesses and how they were finding the therapy. Their stories of improvement and praise for the protocol were very inspiring and only consolidated in my mind that if I ever got cancer or seriously ill, I would do this therapy and other natural protocols such as hyperbaric oxygen therapy and Burma mats. Since I became independent after I moved to Cambridge for university, I've practiced the same principles that I grew up with. I've been extremely health conscious, sticking to all organic produce. I prepare all my own meals and I absolutely do not drink or cook with tap water. I've never taken drugs despite pressure to, and rarely drink alcohol. Every time I got ill, I turned to my mum first for advice. Practically fanatical about health, my close friends know me as a staunch advocate for the Gerson therapy and natural healing. Indeed, Andrew and I had several discussions where I made my preference for natural healing over chemotherapy and radiotherapy very clear. I note that much of plaintiff's argument is centred on my mum being a notorious anti-vaxxer, and which somehow proves that she is an extremely forceful advocate of natural health. I too am anti-vax, as is my sister, as is my dad. This only serves to enforce that I am a dedicated advocate of natural medicine, given my upbringing, and have long held the view that conventional medicine is not to be trusted. Indeed, both my sister and I even refused our HPV vaccine when it became available to us due to our scepticism towards conventional medicine. I was held in Maidstone Hospital between the 22nd of December and the 24th of December 2023, and at no point did my hospital stay did I say to anyone I want to do chemotherapy, nor did I ever imply it. In a conversation via telephone the night I got admitted, my mum urged me to consider all the information presented to me, ask lots of questions, particularly about survival rates in the coming years. Only you will know what the right path is. Only you will feel a calm come over you when you make it. That was apparently in question, in speech marks. So the next day, after the MDM, the doctors came round and officially told me, note the ambiguity in their wording, they had found cells of B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in a mass on my chest. That doesn't sound particularly ambiguous, but okay. I particularly sat through and listened to their proposed treatment by R-CHOP chemotherapy. When I asked what the survival rates were at 1, 3, 5, 7 and 10 years, I was told that there was no data, despite the oncologist assuring me that it was curative. Anders' mum, Lisa, was in the room at the time and helpfully told me that this was a novel treatment given the lack of data. The doctors did not disagree. I instantly felt sceptical about this experimental treatment. though I still tried to remain open, so accepted the information pack. I began to feel like I wasn't being told the complete truth from the doctors about the treatment plan, and it started to make me scared. I called my mum to discuss these concerns and told her that I was a little bit afraid of Dr. Mohan. I carefully read through all the information, which included pages and pages of frightening side effects and information about egg harvesting, since R-CHOP would likely leave me fertile. At this point, I decided to call Dr. Patrick Vickers. Throughout my stay at the hospital, we would have a long phone conversation, and we discussed all my options regarding choosing the natural route. We discussed my fears. My calls to Patrick were instrumental in my decision to opt for the alternative treatment route. By comparison, my mum's visits were often simply to bring me my favourite soups and brand new pyjamas and to make sure I was being nursed properly. For example, she reminded staff that patients like me who were suffering from superior vena cava syndrome had to be nursed upright, not flat. She also spoke to the doctors and nurses about ascertaining my blood results and my histology, though the doctors refused both her and myself this information, a refusal which is indeed illegal. I found my mum's presence in the hospital with me to be very helpful and comforting. At first, I was nervous and anxious about her coming since we had had a falling out, and I hadn't spoken to her or seen her for several months since I had found a flat and moved out. But that resentment I felt melted when she entered the room. I could finally drop the brave face and express all my fears and feelings to her. It was clear that the nurses and doctors did not like her. Her approach is very authoritative. Though she wasn't rude to any of the staff, her tone and knowledge of the law and medicine clearly unsettled the nurses and doctors. I was discharged on Christmas Eve into my mum's care at our home in Uckfield. In the coming weeks, I went about getting everything in order, discharging myself from Dr. Mohan and selling my car and finding a replacement tenant for my flat share. The plaintiffs accused my mum of having forced me to sell my car and give up the flat, which is simply not true. The car is 22 years old and has 7 major oil leaks. Hang on, then why did you sell it? Why don't you just that doesn't make sense to me. Never mind. I'm editorializing when I shouldn't be. I'd been in contact with my mechanic to discuss selling it to him for scraps. Oh, there you go. From at least November 2023. As for the flat, I received £400 a month as statutory sick pay. I can't afford to pay the rent, which is £560 per month without bills. So it's just not an option, and I happily accept that. I want to live with my mum for the foreseeable future as I get back on my feet anyway. Gabriel's poor mental health has always been of concern to me. He has spoken to several mental health professionals and is or has been on antidepressants. He struggles with agoraphobia and a seemingly very codependent relationship, which has served to worsen these issues. His self-care is poor, and this is reflected by his unhealthy colour, unkempt appearance, and nervous tics. Finally, he is very unstable, struggling with rage issues that are very scary to watch and can leave you fearing for your safety. It is for these reasons that I chose not to tell him immediately about my decision not to do chemo. I was afraid what unstable reaction he would afflict on me. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I was violently shook awake by my brother whilst my ex-boyfriend Anda watched. They had assaulted my mother, pushing past her to get to me. Having been in a deep sleep, the first sleep since leaving the hospital, I was confused and heavily panicked. I started to cry and throw up from the shock. My mum was desperately trying to pull Gabriel off me because of my having had the drug Fragmin in hospital, and this could have caused the mass in my chest to burst important blood vessels. Violently shaking me like that, Gabriel could have killed me. Once my mum had gotten to the 2 men back downstairs, I heard Gabriel and Anda verbally abusing my mum and my mum's friend who was there for support. Before I fell asleep, I heard the Gabriel and Anda calling the 2 women whores and prostitutes. Again, sorry if I'm stumbling over this, but some of the punctuation is just as poor as in the previous thing that was written by Kay. Anyway, I heard the Gabriel and Anda calling the 2 women whores and prostitutes with such clear and unstable behaviour at this attempt. He is in no position to objectively interfere with my bodily autonomy and health choices. I was appalled with how Gabriel has behaved since I informed him I was not doing chemotherapy. The abusive text messages that he has continued sent to both my parents and my sister are deeply upsetting and coercive. His long text message to me telling me that I was going to die if I did not do chemotherapy I found to be both very distressing and incredibly manipulative. Sebastian's feigned concern for me is laughable. He has made little to no effort or even text me since I got sick, ignoring my messages and going the entire months of both February and March without anything. He only got back in touch at the end of March when both my mum and sister texted him to say I missed him. I found his blatant lack of concern for me extremely hurtful. I attempted several times to fix a date with Sebastian for him to come round for dinner, but his replies were very elusive and it was clear that seeing me was not his full priority. He asked for my mum to not be there, but she is my full-time carer and I didn't want to be alone with him either. The plans fizzled out and he could not come round. Sebastian cannot possibly comment on my health and well-being in the months since I became ill because of this complete lack of contact. All the inaccurate information about me in this statement is hearsay from people who have had no contact with me in months. Sebastian and I do not have a close relationship and go years without seeing or talking to each other. This is because when I see him, I thought you just said that you missed him anyway. He became verbally extremely abusive and makes me very upset. This was the case last time I saw him. When I drove him from my mum's house into London, he was so unkind to me on the way to a restaurant in London with my sister and his friend present that I was in tears when we arrived. I dropped them off at the restaurant and drove home because I was too upset. His anger issues are so intense that the housemaster at Eton made him attend anger management classes with therapy. With so little attempts to be in touch with his seriously ill sister, Sebastian's motivation for this involvement in the case do not include me. He sees an opportunity to attack our mum. He seems to crave her attention whilst also desperately wanting to destroy her life. He purports to hate her but spent 2 hours in her house and hugged her upon leaving with my situation. He sees an opportunity to attack our mum. The entire nation is aware of his interview for the BBC, which he would have received a substantial sum for. That's not true. Jobless at 25, perhaps he is trying to generate more media buzz again for a second interview and for more cash. You don't get paid. We can both attest to that. He is simply trying to ruin my mum's reputation and have her jailed so he can take ownership of her house, something he has attempted to do for years. He is not to be trusted. Ander Harris' statement is so full of mistruths, events taken out of context, and plain libelous claims, it would take too much time and pages to refute them all. The plaintiffs argue that my mum coerced me into breaking up with Ander. This is completely untrue. I broke up with Ander because on 2 separate occasions in January, he sexually assaulted me. I finally told my sister about what happened in mid-February, and her upset response confirmed that my feelings were valid. I had been taken advantage of. At first, I was really embarrassed and wanted the whole thing to go away, so I didn't report it. But after receiving a bag with my black lacy underwear and an old toothbrush on the 25th of the 4th, 24, I had to report it to the police. Given the taunting nature of the message, the bag certainly came from Anders' house as it was in Swedish with Lisa's handwriting on it. I fear I'm being stalked or harassed by either Ander or his mum. I'd also been unhappy in my relationship before we broke up. He is a habitual drug user, which I found deeply upsetting, and he'd been increasingly pressuring me to do them with him. I declined every time. I was also aware that he had introduced my sister to drugs when she was just 15 and had her keep his drugs in our house for him. These drugs were found by my mum and reported to the police. All these things were beginning to weigh on my conscience and made me really sad. When I first met Ander, he attempted to get me to say bad things about my mum. I found this incredibly insulting and always clear that Ander disliked my mum, which made it difficult for me who was caught in the middle. Since dating Ander, my relationship with my mum declined considerably. In 2020, we had a very good relationship. I'd called her regularly during my first and second terms of university, and I believe that Ander and his mum helped to break the relationship down. I am completely disgusted at Lisa's behaviour since I fell ill. From the minute she learned of my decision to reject chemo, Lisa sat at the foot of my hospital bed. This is Anders' mother, crying and refusing to talk to me all day. I felt that she was emotionally blackmailing me to choose chemotherapy. She also kept leaving the room to speak to the doctors, supposedly to ask more questions about chemotherapy. I was upset and annoyed that she was interfering, but her presence in the room was worse, so I did not object. It later turned out that she had been speaking to the doctors to try and persuade them to have me forced into staying. She made completely false claims that my mother had been so abusive that the police had to remove me. The doctors did not check with me if this statement was true, and this got published on all of my doctor's notes. At no time did I give permission for Lisa to speak with my doctors about my private health and medical information, and I'm frankly furious that she attempted to have my capacity removed so my decision not to do chemotherapy would be overridden. This emotional blackmail continued in the car on the way home. She did not speak to me at all, and when I humbly asked if we could open a few Christmas presents back at the house, she said no. I was incredibly upset with Lisa's behaviour. It was coercive and caused me deep distress. I texted her at first, but eventually stopped wanting to talk to her because I was too angry with her behaviour and knew that she couldn't be trusted. Despite my lack of response since the 23rd of the 2nd, 24, Lisa has proceeded to send me extremely long messages consistently, even after her son and I broke up. The sheer length of this slew of messages is disturbing and is harassment. So on the 16th of the 4th, 24, I blocked her and want no relationship with Lisa or her son. Lisa has a long psychiatric history, which had affected her relationship with her sons, who did not live with her for many years because of it. I feel that Lisa has a codependent attachment to me. I had always made an effort to be pleasant to Lisa, as I pitied her for the way her sons rejected her. Apart from living with her, they often didn't spend any time around her. They even made separate meals. In early November 2020, Anda called me and told me Lisa had obsessively stalked me online before she had met me, watching all the interviews Sebastian gave, reading up my mum's anti-vax work, and so on. I was very upset and felt violated. Anda informed me that she often does this, even finding Google Street Views of Anda's friends' homes, and I believe that it's a major source of tension between the two of them. I believe she's trying to take me away from my mum and become my new mother figure. Lisa's statement that she had thought that I had accepted chemo and was going back to live with her is ridiculous. At no point had I ever said that I wanted to do that or implied I would. Even if I were to choose that treatment in a very distant reality, I would absolutely not go to her house. There's mold. She hoards. She has very bad health habits. And as stated, has had a long psychiatric history. I would always want to live with my mother, as she has 40 years of medical experience behind her and would take incredible care of me, as she is doing currently. I've suffered no abuse with my mum. We have had a wonderful childhood filled with trips to National Trust venues, swimming, harp, guitar, ballet lessons and board games. The text messages and Gabriel's statements from summer 2023 paint a biased, untrue version of events. I'm ashamed to admit how vile I was being to my mum at the time. I was stressed by my lack of degree and inability to secure a graduate job. I was extremely irritable and took it out on my mum in the form of name-calling and inciting arguments. I'm ashamed to admit that I lied to Gabriel, Anda and Lisa, admitting the terrible things that I'd said and done so I could look more like a victim. I wanted sympathy from them, so I wouldn't feel the self-loathing from my own bad behaviour. Like everyone, I've argued with my mum over the years. Yes, but I have lived with my mum throughout the studies. Sometimes I have stayed up at college when I wanted a break from my mum, and it was convenient since lots of my friends stayed over. I would also like to point out that in my conversations with Lisa, she did not once try to work through a solution with me that would reconcile my mum and I's relationship, despite the fact that Anda had a very strained relationship with her from age 14 to 18, and he disliked going round to see her. Jesus. Lisa was more than happy to see my relationship with my mum deteriorate completely, which only strengthens my view that she had a codependent attachment to me. My relationship with my mum may be complicated. She has always been there when I needed her, despite how I have treated her. That is why I called her straight away when I got called home from Sweden. I feel a lot of regret towards how I have made her look to others because of my own guilt. I am on excellent terms with my mum. We are the best. We have been since I met. We're the best I have been since I met Anda, and I am enjoying exploring our new adult-to-adult relationship. We've discussed what happened in summer. We've now made amends. I do not have a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis. It is a differential diagnosis in which cancer could not be ruled out. I have not had any of the classic symptoms of lymphoma, no lymph nodes, no night sweats, no fatigue. My blood results over the last few months do not indicate lymphoma, and on the histology it states I was lacking in the main marker for lymphoma. Why, with all this doubt, would I undergo a treatment plan so harsh if I might not survive? And I would be rendered infertile if I did. I'm 23. I don't want to be made infertile. I absolutely will not set foot in Maidstone Hospital again. I was given drugs without my consent. Indeed, a low dose of steroids turned out to be 80 to 90 milligrams. An IV bag I've been told was a saline flush turned out to be a newly licensed, very dangerous drug named rasburicase. The side effects of these drugs started the minute I left the hospital, and they made me very sick for the entire month of January. With no wristband ever given to me, despite me asking nurses and doctors for it, Dr. Mohan and her team have given me drugs with no consent. I have fallen victim to the medical battery, of course. I do not trust these doctors with my life. The other reasons for rejecting conventional treatment, including my background in natural healing and my dislike of the odds I have been given. I had a 1 in 5 chance of dying during R-CHOP. I will not risk those odds for a diagnosis I do not have. The current situation, I'm delighted with my chosen treatment path. All of my original symptoms that took me to the hospital, swollen face, excruciating chest pains, intense headaches from pressure on my carotid, inability to move my right arm have completely gone. Put a pin in that. That will be important later. My energy levels increase day to day, so I've seen lots of my friends and my sister visit regularly. I even threw a birthday party in Brighton, which was attended by my sister and my two best friends, my mum and her friend. To suggest I'm being isolated is ridiculous because I have lots of people visiting. I choose not to see my twin brother because, as I stated in text, he will do anything to get me to start chemo, and I'm afraid of him. My boyfriend took advantage of me when I was the most vulnerable, and I am unsafe in his presence. Lisa's coercive behaviour in the hospital and stalker-like behaviour since means I want no relationship with her ever again. The situation is being monitored by monthly blood tests booked with my GP. After each set, I have an appointment with Dr. Hutchins to discuss the results and to check over my general health, checking energy levels, appetite, mood, etc. My blood tests show that all my levels are returning to normal. There has been a lot of talk about undergoing a CT scan. In December 2023 alone, I had 2 X-rays and a CT scan on my chest. Concerned about that amount of radiation, I spoke with a senior radiographer of 20 years of experience, Simone Platt. She informed me that to have another scan just 6 weeks later would involve a considerable amount of radiation, which would carry iatrogenic risks later in life. I then made the decision not to have a scan so early on in my treatment. I intend to have a CT scan, but I will wait until my entire team agrees that this is the best course of action. The fact that my own brother has brought a court case against me whilst I'm focusing all my energy on recovering from a life-threatening illness is shameful. The stress of the stream of emails from his lawyer, the energy that I've wasted writing statements while spending all my savings just so I had some form of legal representation has caused me an insurmountable amount of harm and suffering. I cannot sleep from stress, and the anxiety has taken away my appetite. Are a good night's sleep and eating well not the pillars of recovery from any illness? It's well known that King Charles is an avid supporter of natural healing. Indeed, his decision to opt for natural medicines and treatment for his own cancer diagnosis barely generated any discord in the public opinion. Well, apart from people saying that he was odd, but fine. I have a clear, even proven capacity and made a decision about my health that corresponds with my upbringing and lifestyle. Yes, this decision was met with the most horrific resistance and accusations. I find the plaintiff's behaviour, particularly Gabriel's and Lisa's, to be incredibly coercive. They're fighting hard for me to be forced into receiving the treatment that they want me to have. The side effects and implications of these drugs are extreme, and it is my body that will endure them, not theirs. It is much easier to be involved when the high stakes are played out far from your body or your safety. Signed, Paloma Shemirani. Now, the first thing that strikes me about that is that's an incredibly spiteful statement. Every single person that she mentions in it has got some sort of problem, has done something horrific, and has got some sort of mental problem. And then they bring up things like that she's got bad hygiene and stuff like that. Why is any of that necessary for a court document? Who's the only person that comes out of that statement good? The only person.
Kay.
Even Paloma says that she is a shit because of how badly she treated Kay. And the other thing that I will say, is that she must have spoken to Kay to get some of that knowledge about the house, knowledge about how Kay felt, knowledge about why Kay was upset that she was shaking her because of this obscure thing where the blood vessels could break in the mass in her chest. By the way, I thought she didn't have a mass in her chest. I don't know. That apparently is Paloma's statement to the court. It strikes me as strange, but, it struck Gabriel as strange. Because when Kay tweeted this out, Gabriel wrote, Kay wants you to believe that these are actually Paloma's words, that the messages Paloma sent, which proved Kay mercilessly hit her repeatedly, is nothing more other than Paloma being vile, and that Paloma actually incited the abuse. You disgust me, Kay. The other thing that was strange is that basically I've seen an interview since said that that Paloma was groomed and taken away from the hospital by Anders' mum. But that above statement seems to say that that's not true, that she went to the house in Uckfield with Kay Shemirani, that she fell out with Lisa straight away to the point where Lisa wouldn't even let her open a Christmas present. I don't know. That doesn't sit quite right with me, that statement. It doesn't strike me as... There seems to be a lot of character assassination and... Why mention Prince Charles in there? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, Sebastian also responded. Hi, Kay, your real name. It's me, your son, the son you beat, isolated and abused for 17 years. What do you think about Paloma signing legal documents a few days before she died while she was unconscious and on life support at a hospital? Will you tell your audience that you forged the legal documents of a dying woman to cover your ass? How can you blame medical malpractice for Paloma's death when you wouldn't let her see a doctor? You wouldn't let her see a doctor after her diagnosis until her heart attack, when it was already too late. Do you ever take personal responsibility for the people you kill, or do you instantly move on to hunting your next victim, like you do with your lover boy Patrick Vickers at the cancer scam clinic you run for profit in Mexico? Why did you wait 45 minutes after Paloma collapsed from a heart attack before calling the ambulance? Is that really what you learned training as a nurse? Or were you scared to take Paloma to the hospital and have your crime discovered? Your lies are collapsing. Beside the fact that no solid lawyer will represent a murder-for-profit freak like you, and your husband's history of domestic violence, support for terrorism, and financial ruin, the logic just isn't there. For fuck's sake, your son Gabriel criticised you, and your response on a podcast yesterday was that he's working for MI6. You're a complete lunatic. And you might try to trick your audience with medical jargon they don't understand to make yourself seem smart. But they don't need medical knowledge to see these holes in your story. They're going to see your true character. You've left a trail of mistakes just like any other serial killer. Time is running out for you. I'd log off and flee the country, but you're a narcissist, so you'll stay and keep running your mouth. Good. You're a sitting duck. Keep quacking. So, wow. Sebastian also then tweeted out, Kate Shemirani, you wrote this statement and fraudulently passed it off as Paloma's words. Not only was Paloma living with you and under your control when she allegedly wrote this, I grew up with you brainwashing me, and I recognize your language in this statement. Paloma didn't talk like this. Key points, such as where Paloma says she was never abused by you, are clearly written by you. We have her text messages where she discusses you beating her while she is suffering from cancer. Your other daughter was taken into foster care at 16, and your sons both report you beating and abusing them. You're a monster. So, yeah, it's heated, certainly. But then Gabriel posted something else on Twitter, which again raises questions. And he put, this is proof of falsification of statement. Please repost this everywhere. No one impersonates my sister, least of all Kay. Also, now Kay can fret about which one of her lackeys has been leaking like a colander to us. So, now this is a partial text message. We can only see two things, but what it says is one's from Dr. Patrick Vickers, who is the man that recommended the Gerson therapy. And this is Sunday, the 12th of May, 2024. Awesome. What's happening with the courts? And Paloma responds, to be honest, I'm being kept out of all of that. And then it cuts off. But the important bit is, to be honest, I'm being kept out of all of that. Which, suggests that potentially she's not that involved with the court case. So who knows? That could be interpreted in different ways. But it doesn't look particularly good. Now, on June the 27th, Kate decides that she's going to go on the Unity News Network. Is that what it's called? UNN, that dreadful right-wing shite? Anyway, right. This was a bit controversial because previously Kate has been on, or she wasn't on, because do you know that the Unity News Network audience didn't used to like her?
Didn't they?
No.
Well,
Well,
I thought they would have liked her.
Well, it's to do with that. Can you remember right in the middle of the last episode, we mentioned that her and Piers Corbyn and Fiona Rose Diamond were taken to court?
Yes.
She was supposed to be on UNN in 2023, but they actually had to cancel her appearance. Like she was all set to go on, and the lad that looks a bit like Penfold came on and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cancel this due to the backlash." And so there was all these comments that were put around, hit and miss with her. This is all about Kate Shemirani. Hit and miss with her, to be honest. She throws in some dodgy names in the movement. Yeah, ask her where that 70k of donations went for a court case that didn't happen. You're joking, aren't you? She's a full-on liar. Makes out that she knows all about pharmaceuticals and the herbalists. This woman is a midwife and has been caught lying loads. She's full of crap. I will debate her live about herbalism all day long. A woman that's had as much plastic surgery and fillers but promotes natural remedies. Someone simply said, shill. Someone said, some people wouldn't know a cheap grifter if they hijacked the stage at a protest, took your money for nothing, and then name-dropped Charlie Ward like that was a good idea. Wake up, people. They live among us. Too many talking heads repeating the same information. I trust no one. The fact that she was talking to those pair of cunts, Charlie Fraud and Sasha Stone, is all very questionable. Please ask her where that 70k went. She is controlled opposition. Looks like Kate is the Bovril of the movement. And then someone responded, Bovril is nice. She's about as welcome as a bout of diarrhea with only white kegs for the beach. No, not a fan of her at all, said someone. No, she's too sensationalist for me. Natural nurse, ? Looks like a lot of not natural procedurals in her face. The toxic purse is in a neutered world, someone responded. KS is a grifter, same as America, no good. 2 years ago, I donated $25 to the cause. And for what? Shameless, soulless, root of all evil, money. What happened to the tens of thousands of pounds that she raised? And this is what happened, right? When she got arrested, she had a crowd fund thing going on, a fundraiser, in which she wrote, I am Kate Shemirani, natural nurse in a toxic world. I've been a nurse for 36 years. I'm a mum of 4, self-employed and a Christian. My love for my fellow man and children all over the world drives me to stand up to tyranny and fight for our freedom, which is now under attack. I am being prosecuted for organising and participating in 3 anti-lockdown rallies in London. All of these were organised by other people, and I was just asked to MC at 2 of them and gave a short speech and said the Lord's Prayer at another one. Fuck off. Like, you know, if you're going to pretend to be an activist, you have to take this. You don't weasel out. I wasn't me that organised it. Anyway. The charges are unlawful and unjust. I'm now being persecuted and even prosecuted and placed at physical risk. Why? Because I dared to use my professional background to speak out against all of the manipulation and lies that are being used to destroy society and our physical, mental, psychological and spiritual well-being. In 2021, I'm going on criminal trial in court in London, charged with organising an illegal gathering. I was already ordered by the police and government to pay £20,000 in fine. I refused to comply with this order, so now I'm being prosecuted. If I'm convicted, I will be sentenced for holding a gathering. This is cruel, tyrannical and totally unconstitutional. Join with me to defeat the total outrage. We must fight for justice, truth and defend liberty. I must raise enough to cover all of my legal and associated costs, and I do not have the money to fight the case myself. However, I am ready and willing to stand up and fight for freedom, truth and liberty for every single man, woman and child in the UK and everywhere around the world. The amount that is needed is estimated at about £70,000. And she did. She managed to raise just under £70,000, right? The problem is, she then complained that she didn't get any access to it. And the lawyer ran off with it. Now, whether he did actually run off with it, I've got no idea. But a lot of people have complained, and including somebody that said, where's my £20 back that I donated to your legal fees? I'm on benefits, and it's a lot of money to people like me. You didn't even turn up. Bet you were having a lovely life on 70k on other people's money. And there was a pattern where she was blocking people that were criticising her and deleting comments on her videos and stuff, including that one. That was a video from Mohammed Shafiq, large up to him and Mr. Bozo Head, and also the sarcastic Barman. Cool. They were following her a lot during COVID, and that's where I got quite a lot of this information. So you know what happened with the court case that she raised £70,000 for?
Get dropped?
No, not entirely. But Cheyenne Sada said, I can never pronounce his last name. Cheyenne, brilliant journalist, wrote, leading anti-vaccine activist Fiona Rose Diamond, aka Fiona Hine and Kate Shemirani, were found guilty of organising rallies in breach of COVID restrictions at Westminster Magistrates Court today. Miss Rose Diamond was fined £825, and Miss Shemirani, £1,875 in absence. So not the £20,000 that she said that she was fined, and not the 70,000, and there was no need for the £70,000 that they raised. And as you can, so people were very pissed off with her, and so for a long time, people thought that she was not to be trusted. Still, a lot of people hold that attitude within the conspiracy world. Anyway, so United News Network interviews Kate, and she says in 2023 that Paloma got ill, complaining of chest and shoulder pain, and she had a biopsy. And she says that originally her brother was listed as next of kin, but that changed when KS arrived in hospital. And she says that this was because they'd had a falling out, and we know that they'd been estranged for months. Kay says, but which family hasn't had this type of a falling out where you don't speak to your mum for months? Well, not mine, but fine, whatever. KS said that she had teams in Italy, Mexico, and Iran that could all give different treatments. And she says that's what you do when you buy a house. You get loads of opinions. So why wouldn't you do the same? And KS said that Paloma received a differential diagnosis, which implies that nothing was confirmed. However, a differential diagnosis is a process of elimination, looking at possible conditions and ruling things out that it can't be. Now, according to the differential diagnosis bits that I've seen, it looks like all indications were it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but they were going to continue testing just to see, because they couldn't rule out other stuff. It doesn't mean that she didn't have that. They did a biopsy, and the biopsy showed apparently that she had it. Anyway, one also could make the argument here, well, they couldn't do any further testing because somebody took her out of hospital. So, anyway. Also, why did none of those other places offer a diagnosis? That's something that I'm struggling. There may be an answer to that, right? Okay. But if you've got all these other places that are there to give you the other options, what was their diagnosis? Because Gerson therapy is to treat cancer. So that, I don't know if that makes any sense to me. She also says that she's a retired nurse. She's not a retired nurse. As we discussed in part 1, she was struck off. That's a small lie, right? But it's a lie. Why would you say such a stupid lie? Especially when you were struck off for doing something that you felt was right. She felt that COVID was fake. She felt that the vaccines were dangerous. That's a noble cause coming from it from her perspective. Why was she lying and say that she retired rather than I was struck off for being a whistleblower?
Yeah, good point.
I don't know, but whatever. So she goes on to claim that Paloma was given Rasputin without her consent, and she was never given a wristband. And she's basically saying that the NHS are drugging people on the sly and not keeping any sort of record so that they can do it. And they basically said that she was hooked up to this mysterious IV that when Kay came in and asked, Paloma says, I've got no idea what it is. And it turned out to be like a pre-chemotherapy drug. And so Kay basically said that this is because the doctors put her on the path to chemotherapy without her consent, tricking her into it. That could be true. What also could be true is that basically Paloma had said, yeah, all right, let's go with this, and changed her mind when her mum turned up shouting. It's just, you couldn't possibly say, obviously. But, we know that Kay was opposed to chemo because she texted and said, don't do chemo. She described chemo as mustard gas in the veins and stuff like that. Also, again, it keeps coming back to this power of attorney. I don't understand it. Power of attorney is only used when someone's incapable of making their own decisions, unless obviously someone consents to this. But why would Paloma consent to this? Why wouldn't she just listen to what her mum said and go, okay, I agree with you? I don't know. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe it's something to do with, who knows? But so apparently Anders' mother was trying to get the consultants to treat Paloma, and Kate thinks that this is suspicious. She's in fucking hospital. Of course, you try and get a treatment. That's why you've gone to hospital. Anyway, Kate says that she doesn't think that she ever had cancer at all. She thinks that she had an infection, which again raises the question, well, why don't you treat her with antibiotics or something? Why don't you go to one of these other places and get that diagnosis of an infection? She says that she would have gone along. She then says that she got power of attorney over Paloma. So I thought she said that in the Richie Allen stage. She definitely said it in this one. And that I was like, why? I don't understand it. Anyway, she says that she would have gone along with Paloma if she wanted chemo, but she didn't. And she claims that in no way did she coerce Paloma into not having chemo. As she did, the first contact that she'd had with her daughter in months was that text that said, tell her not to consent to chemo or anything. So, again, that doesn't seem true. Why don't you just say, I made it clear that I was opposed to chemotherapy because of the knowledge that I have. That's perfectly legitimate. Why are you trying to distance yourself from that decision? She says that death was actually caused by an overdose of adrenaline and a cocktail of other drugs, including fentanyl, on the 19th of July, right? Which again raises a question. So, in those 7 months while she was at your house, why was she still ill? She says that she was almost fully recovered on the 19th of July. Okay, right. Fair enough. But she claims that the illness that she'd been suffering for the 7 months that kept her away from everything and stuff like that was caused by this raspberry case caused low oxygen intake in the blood. And she thinks that basically that was what was causing this illness, was that basically she wasn't passing enough oxygen around her blood. Did they treat her for that? What is the treatment for that? No idea. She then says that she'd been out shopping on the 19th, and she says that there's a video of her FaceTiming her sister looking very alive and well and nourished. And it's like, I thought you said that she was under 6 stone. That appears to be a contradiction to your, she died because they overdosed her because she was very, very slight. We FaceTimed, she looked very alive and well and nourished. Okay. When Paloma was taken to Kay's house, Gabe and Andy turned up. This is apparently the Christmas Eve thing. And Kay says that Andy was abusive and had sexually assaulted Paloma. But these allegations were not made until after the trip to Sweden with Andy, prior to her biopsy and her decision not to have chemo. So this was all after the fact, essentially. Basically, apparently they were fine. They went to Sweden. She got ill. They came back. He sexually assaulted his girlfriend. She dumped him. This is apparently what happened according to Kay. Or she dumped him after about 2 months. Anyway, says that Anna and Gabe were rude and shouting at Kate, and so she kicked him out of the house. And she says that on Boxing Day, Paloma's face swelled and she was feeling ill, vomiting and delirious, and her pulse was 144. So this is 2 days after she's taken her out of hospital. Kate says that she got more ill as her cortisol levels dropped, and then she says that all her hair fell out, which claims the hospital. She also claims that the hospital wanted to give Paloma R-CHOP drugs, which she claims would drop her survival down to under 20% at 2 years. That R-CHOP, was also going to render her 100% infertile, and she didn't want that. The thing is, why is any of that important if she didn't have the disease? She's not got cancer, according to Kate, so you've decided not to do that. It's not important. Move on. Although, apparently this is the raspberry case that is causing her face to swell and her hair to fall out and stuff like this. But anyway, right? Kay then says that Paloma in the hospital, this was before she was taken out, wasn't offered T-cell therapy or immunotherapy. Why doesn't that make any sense? Because Kay says that she doesn't have cancer. So why would you be treating different alternatives to chemotherapy if you said that she doesn't have cancer? And again, I'll reiterate, why did none of her clinics across the world help? Right? If she's suggesting that these sort of pre-chemo drugs made her ill and this lasted for 7 months, and then eventually killed her, which seems to be, or sort of made her ill to the point where she had a heart attack. Why doesn't that happen to all chemotherapy patients that take more than those doses? Don't know.
Yeah. To be honest, man, none of it really makes sense.
It doesn't, does it? When she's asked,
at least like when Kay and allegedly Paloma, their narratives don't really make sense. There seems to be lots of holes in them, lots of questions, that's weird. Why is that?
Yeah,
like
there may be explanations for all of this. Who knows? But as I say, all we're doing, we haven't got an opinion on this. All we're doing is looking at what is in the public domain. And
I haven't seen very much of it all, so I'm hearing it first from you.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
A long time ago, I did watch a Sebastian interview.
The first one you did with Mariana.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But not really that much. I didn't want to really get in touch with him because we had a fallout with Kay publicly, and I thought it would be a bit cheap to kind of bring him on and get him to slag his mum off. I think that's not really like what we're trying to do.
That's not
here.
what we do, is it?
That's our job.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Right, that is what we do.
But so I also haven't obviously been paying too much attention because I knew that you would walk me through it so I could like find out about it. But yeah, like I ain't got an opinion on it.
Yeah, no, because we don't know. All we can do is look at what's in the public domain and see if it stacks up, and invite listeners to make their own conclusions. Yeah,
and all I can say right now is that part of the narrative just doesn't make sense.
Well, here's something that's a little strange, because Penfold fellow asks her, "Did you recommend Gerson therapy to Paloma?" And we must remember that Gerson therapy is a thing that Kate promotes all the time. All the time. She claims it saved her life. Again, if she believes that, there's nothing suspicious about that. But she says no. She didn't promote it at all. And it wouldn't have been right for her to promote it because, and I quote, she wasn't her practitioner. Which is a very strange thing. Now, somebody had wrote a comment, which is not necessarily the opinion of Someday I Call It Conspiracy, but somebody put, weird, it's like she's trying to distance herself from liability. Either she is refusing to take responsibility, or she knows that she's fucked. But she says that she did take Paloma for a second opinion. She says that she took Paloma to a cardiologist, and this cardiologist said that Paloma was really ill, but go to a hematologist. And KS says that basically Paloma went to a GP, but she wanted not to be on her own, so I presume that Kate was there with her, and the GP convinced her to do Gerson. So it wasn't Kate, even though Kate was in the room, and this is totally a thing that Kate promotes, but it was nothing to do with her. It was this GP. Now, when they say GP, I don't know if they mean GP in the sense that normal people would mean GP. I cannot imagine an NHS GP, for example, saying, yeah, ignore the NHS, do Gerson therapy. So when she says, is that Patrick Vickers? I don't know. She doesn't explain. But she says that essentially it was all her daughter's decision, and she also tried hyperbaric chambers as well. But it was Kate that told her not to get chemo. We know that from the text, right? Also, KS got a power of attorney. It was Kay who took her home, where Kay herself does juice-only Gerson diets. But it's a complete coincidence that Paloma chose to do the treatment that Kate definitely promotes. That wasn't her telling her daughter to do that or convincing her daughter to do that. It was someone else. Fair enough. If that's your story and you're sticking to it. When she was asked if she was violent to any of the children, rather than say no, she says, "Where's the evidence?" She also says, if children are being abused, they won't thrive. We discussed that before. That's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. Like, you know, lots of people were horrifically abused and went on to be very, very successful. Now, Kate then goes on to say about her sons, they're guilty. They never saw her, Paloma, and they're guilty. They feel sick to their stomach with guilt. She also says that Sebastian was abusive to Paloma the last time he saw her, which is September. So the last time he saw her prior to her getting ill. And she says that Sebastian was actually arrested for being scary to his sister. She then says that she knows what Sebastian's got into, and she knows how much trouble he is, and only God can help him. And at this point, Penfold gets decidedly uncomfortable and starts wriggling in his chair and says, Kate, let me just stop you there. I know you're not the sort of person who would throw your sons under a bus. Anyway, she then goes on to say that Paloma actually had a heart problem, like a sort of congenital heart problem that like, you know, but then she sort of implies that the pressure of the court case contributed to her death. She said that this was exacerbating her pre-existing heart condition, or she's implying that. But she says that the stress of the court case contributed to her death. Right. She then says that they wanted to take her eggs. That the NHS wanted to harvest Paloma's eggs, take them from her body. Which sounds really sinister if you say it like that, right? Okay. But if you say it in the way that it's like normal, like they understand that there's a chance that you could be infertile after chemotherapy. So what they do is they take some of your eggs and so that you can have IVF later in life, should you wish to have children. But it does sound more sinister if you say that they wanted to steal her eggs. Anyway, she also claims that there was a plot by her sons to steal her house from underneath her. Says that Sebastian has been trying to steal her house for ages, really, which corresponds to the statement that Paloma made, which means that she must have told Paloma about that as well. I can't think of any other explanation. On July 19th, she went with Paloma to an appointment. They went shopping and she had lunch outside. Then Paloma said that she was feeling hot, and so she went inside. Now, Kate then shows a picture of Paloma on that day. This picture that she shows on her phone is nearly unrecognizable. She goes on about how all her lumps had gone down. But if you look at this picture, her face is very swollen, and there appears to be a great big lump on her chin, on like the right side of her jaw, or there'll be left side of her jaw, right as you're looking at it. She doesn't look a well woman. And this is the thing where she says she looked well and nourished, and you know, and she was practically better at that point. Remember, she was practically better. It's like, well, that picture looks, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but it didn't look like the previous pictures that I'd seen of her in like a prom dress and stuff like that. She's a very, very attractive young lady. Like, and this, you can clearly see that there's something not quite right. It looks like she's had an allergic reaction or something. Like, so who knows? Anyway, so Paloma goes inside saying that she's feeling hot. And then all of a sudden, apparently her eyes roll back and she goes unconscious. And this is when Kate thought that she choked. So she forced an airway, a cannula, is it called an airway, down her throat. Right? And at this point in the interview, Kate keeps repeating, she was never cyanose. She was never cyanose. She wasn't breathing, and we couldn't find a heartbeat, but she was never cyanose. Right, what cyanose means is when your lips and skin go sort of blue-grey. And she says that she couldn't find a heartbeat, and she wasn't sure that she's breathing, and that she was never cyanose. I'm not a doctor, but that sounds like at that point Paloma might have been dead. Why do you keep repeating she was never cyanose? As if you're trying to infer that she
Yeah.
definitely wasn't dead. I don't know. That doesn't sit right. KS then claimed that she started CPR, but then she stopped because, again, she wasn't cyanose. She wasn't clammy. She wasn't clammy. She wasn't cyanose. She was just pale and not breathing with no heartbeat. But she wasn't cyanose. So the important thing to take away from this, Brent, is that Paloma was not cyanose. Then,
So why are you telling me that?
do you know, what did she do next? What would you do in that situation?
Call the ambulance, but that's probably not what she did.
No, she called a friend.
Yeah.
She called her friend, and a friend came over, and they had a SATS monitor, one of those things that you put on people's fingers that show blah blah blah. And the SATS monitor said that it was a level of 43. Now, again, I know nothing about this, but I looked it up, and apparently anything below 60 is dangerous and indicative of death, or like you're near to death at the very least. KS then claims that she used a stethoscope to hear Paloma's heart, and all of a sudden, a very faint heart beat came on the heart monitor that they've got. Whether this is the SATS machine or whether it's a separate thing, I don't know. At some point, an ambulance is called, and the first responder, they basically, as far as my understanding goes, and forgive me if I'm wrong about this, she didn't want her to perform CPR on her because of her long nails. Also, an air ambulance arrives. Now, then Kay goes on to say that she noted that Paloma, the paramedic, noted that Paloma was very slight. Kay said that she was under 6 stone. But then she goes on to explain that sounded like she was only ever 8 stone at her heaviest. She was a ballerina, a Rodin ballerina, and apparently this is the sort of weight. But that's still a loss of like nearly 2 stone. That's still, we would acknowledge, the slightest she's probably ever been as an adult. Like,
That's still a quarter of her weight.
what the fuck's she ill with that's made her lose like a quarter of her weight?
Yeah.
Anyway, so then Kay basically says that she repeats her story that the paramedic killed Paloma by giving her an appropriate amount of adrenaline. They then put a femoral IV in, and apparently Paloma went blue. Now, she then makes a big deal about them not using the helicopter and some of the paramedics sitting outside her house for 30 minutes. But she could have been in the back of the ambulance, being seen to, being hooked up to machines and stuff like that. I don't know about that, honestly, to be quite honest. Now, at this point, the host, because he's a journalist, obviously, starts pushing back a little bit. And he says that basically, Mariana Spring has said that all of this is made up. This is all nonsense. It's all there to cover Kate's actions. And, you know, essentially that Mariana has implied, as has her sons, that it was her decision to sort of coerce Paloma into not taking the advice of the NHS that ultimately led to her medical condition worsening and sadly her dying. Kate says that she doesn't need to cover up anything as she has proof. She has proof of all of this, but unfortunately she can't show anybody because that would be contempt of court. Now, I would point out at this point that, and this may well be the case, who can say, but the entirety of this seems to be that Kate knows better than several rafts of experts, better than paramedics, better than people in oncologists, better than everybody in the hospital, better than all the responders and such like that. And all of them are combined in some sort of a plot, a nefarious plot, to kill her daughter. The host then, for some reason, says that he praises Kay, and he says, I know that Kay is on the up and up. And he uses an example. Do you want to have a guess at the sort of the example that the host uses to say that he knows that Kay is a shrewd and honest woman? Because Kate was one of the very first people to say that Nurse Luce Letby was innocent. He then goes on to say Well, on that, Kate has been absolutely 100% vindicated. So she should also be believed on this occasion. I would like to point out that actually, not only has she not been vindicated, they think she might have killed even more babies. The man is a colossal twat in both senses of the word. Also, Kate Shemirani tweeted earlier this year. This is, you'll like this, Brent. This was in support of Lucy Letby. Lucy Patsy Letby, Beverly Patsy Allett, dare we, Harold Patsy Shipman.
Jesus.
She goes on, be my guest, start looking, seek and ye shall find. Beverly Allett killed a series of babies. Beverly Allett killed a series of babies. Harold Shipman is possibly the largest serial killer known to the English Isles. Right? But Kay thinks that all of them might be innocent. Yeah. She says that Lucy Letby was framed by having the babies injected with adrenaline. And that's not true. They were injected with air. Adrenaline was used to try and resuscitate the babies, not to kill them. Now, if one was cynical, one might say it could either be a mistake on her part, or it could be a concerted effort to try and paint the picture that this is a pattern of behaviour by the NHS. Of murdering people with adrenaline and then blaming it on something else or someone else. Anyway, KS then says that Paloma never actually had a cardiac arrest, so shouldn't have been given adrenaline. She just said that she couldn't find a heartbeat and she didn't know if Paloma was breathing. Why the fuck did you call the ambulance? Why did you give her a nasal and an oral cannula for her airways? I don't get that. Penfold then asks if Panorama is basically the whole thing was to cover up Paloma's death. And Kate says, yes, that was the whole point. Panorama was there to spread a load of lies to cover up the fact that the NHS is murdering people. And it's a plot that involves an Israeli pharmaceutical company, and they're killing people by shooting them in the leg with adrenaline. And that Panorama is a tool of MI6, and that Sebastian had a second interview with MI6. Again, we reiterate, MI6 is not domestic. MI6 is foreign intelligence. It would be MI5 that would be involved with anything like that. But anyway. She said that Paloma was put on a life support machine. Now, what's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that, but what's suddenly struck me as like not right about that? Because she didn't have a heartbeat, and you phoned an ambulance. Then she was given adrenaline, which you say killed her, but then she was alive enough to be put on a life support machine. Don't know. Could just be the way that it's been explained. She also then says that she spoke with Patrick Policino. Do we know who Patrick Policino is? Patrick Policino is the nutter that came up with the idea that midazolam was being used to murder people. He's that Christian guy that has been thrown out of all sorts of courts because basically he's got this idea that only God can kill people. And his entire evidence, which was then later stolen by Jackie Devoy and presented as her own idea that midazolam was used to kill people, was that the NHS stockpiled midazolam. Midazolam is used as a sedative for putting people on ventilators, and a lot of people needed to be put on ventilators. That's not evidence. That's not evidence. It's not even close to being evidence. KS, now here's something. KS says that she asked the doctors to check for brain stem death, thinking that basically maybe that Paloma was still alive. Do you know what's wrong with that? Well, Kate doesn't believe in brain death.
You what?
Well, she's tweeted this in January 2025, and she's made several statements about this. And this is a cavalcade of wrong information. You cannot take organs from a cadaver. The best organ donors of a beating heart, a circulation, are under 30 years old and ideally on a ventilator. Basically, somebody is being murdered to give someone else organs. The entire brain death scenario is a lie.
Okay.
She doesn't think that brain death is a thing. So how actually you fucking die? I've got no idea. But it's one of those things where, they lie to you about brain death. They tell you that your brain is dead, but you're not really dead. It's like, all right, stand up then. No, pretty dead to me. Anyway, as soon as Paloma died, she started jumping up and down and saying that they couldn't have her organs, which completely contradicts her previous statement. How could they have her organs if she was dead? I thought you had to take the organs from a live body. So why would they try and take her organs from a dead body? Incidentally, you can take organs from a dead body. Of course you don't have to take them from a fucking living body. Ridiculous nonsense. Also, there is a debate about this, right? Okay. An overdose of adrenaline doesn't always, but can cause damage to some organs. So surely if the whole point is to steal organs for resale, there must be a better way of doing it that doesn't risk damaging the organs. She then says that people who have been declared brain dead, which is not a thing, often wake up days later. So why were you trying to get them to confirm brain death if you don't believe it's a thing? Anyway, Penfold says that this is all completely believable because the NHS is both incompetent and, as we all know, evil. So it's entirely likely that they are killing people to steal their organs. She then goes on to say that basically Paloma didn't want to do chemo because it would cause her to become infertile, which is why they would take eggs, and that it could kill her. But again, why are we even considering this treatment? Because you don't think she's got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You think she's got some sort of infection. So why would you even begin to treat? You don't have to say, we're not doing chemo because 1 in 5 people that do it end up dead. It is not successful. You could just say, we're not doing chemo because she didn't have cancer. Also, Kate says that Paloma had said that she didn't want her brothers at her funeral. What's problematic about that statement? Why was she thinking about a funeral? She was getting better. Apparently on the day that she died, she was practically recovered. Why would you be thinking of a funeral? If I die, Mummy, please tell my brothers not to come. Why would you be having that conversation? You think you're getting better. Anyway, she also basically says that Paloma desperately wanted to expose her abusive ex-boyfriend, and also Anders' mum, Lisa, who Kate claims groomed Paloma. But yeah, she also says that she's cut her sons out of her will and spends a surprising amount of time basically sort of taunting them about how they're not going to get the house. She then denies having an abortion, and she denies killing pets, which is something that she's been accused of, denies ever having had depression. And again, she does this, like, anyone can see my medical records. Anyone can see my medical records. It's like, she might be telling the truth, but that is a fairly meaningless statement, basically, because, as I say, like, they're not your fucking stats as a goalkeeper. They're not publicly available. Like, do you know what I mean? The host then goes on to say that basically, well, the BBC have got form for this. They lied about Kate during COVID. Then she says that all she did was advise people not to take the vaccine, which is not true. She called for the hanging of doctors and nurses and said that COVID wasn't real. So that's a lie from the host. The host says that no one regrets not taking the vaccine, and that's not fucking true either. Like, hundreds of people begged for it on their deathbeds. Even David Steele, the prominent liar and conspiracy theorist, begged for it on his deathbed. He then lies that there were large numbers of deaths caused by the vaccines, and he then says that Kate was incredibly shrewd and correct to say that the HPV vaccine was also deadly, which it isn't. So, Kate then comes out with quite an interesting statement, and see if you believe this, Brent. The CIA made mRNA vaccines in the 1970s for the sole purpose of killing people.
Well, but that's a bit of a statement.
It is, isn't it? Like,
I've never even heard that one.
she doesn't follow up on it. She then just goes on to say that basically the whole thing is just about trying to discredit her because she's such a powerful whistleblower, such a voice of truth, basically. And they keep referring to this Pandemic 2 trial as if it was something sinister. And what it was, right? It was a double-blind trial to see if adrenaline helped after cardiac arrest. And the trial showed that it kind of did. Not brilliantly, but seeing as the alternative is death, it's preferable. They're basically trying to say that the whole Paramedic 2 trial was fraudulent and it was a testing ground to see if it killed people so that they could steal their organs. She then brings on a chap called Stuart Wilkie, who's apparently a man whose father was in his 80s and had a stroke. And the NHS basically said that he would never recover from this stroke. And so obviously Stuart has come to the conclusion that the man in his 80s having a stroke, that wasn't what killed him. That was just the excuse that the NHS used to murder him. I'm not entirely sure for what. But 6 days later, his mum died in a separate care home. So they were ill enough to require being in a care home. Okay, fine, whatever. But this was also murder, according to him. And he says that during the Pandemic 3 trial, patients were randomly assigned treatments, and the most harmful route, according to Stewart, was shooting adrenaline into the bone marrow. I went and read this study. The trial showed no such thing. It showed very little difference between a blood IV and a bone marrow IV. And so he's lying, and his entire premise relies on you wanting to believe that people are being killed with adrenaline for no reason. He says that it's a 50-50 if you got a marrow IV, so it's worse than Russian roulette, getting adrenaline from a paramedic. Now, he's forgotten a very, very important factor of paramedics giving adrenaline to certain people. Why do they give adrenaline to these people, Brent?
To start their heart.
Yeah, they're already dead. So when he's saying it's a 50-50, so worse than Russian roulette are the chances of you basically having a positive outcome with adrenaline. What are the chances of having a positive outcome without adrenaline? Well, they're none, aren't they? Zero. So his entire theory and premise makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, he claims that the outcome of the Paramedic 3 trial showed that 97% of people in ambulances are either dead or brain damaged. So I was like, well, that will be easy to find out. So I've Googled this, and apparently that's not even close to being true. He then goes on to say that 31% of brain damage is caused by adrenaline overdose. And this appears to be a statement that he's taken from a 2022 New England Journal of Medicine study that stated about 31% of survivors in the adrenaline group had either moderately severe or severe brain damage, compared with 18% of those in the placebo group, according to the report. That includes severe brain damage in about 21% of those receiving adrenaline versus 9% of those receiving placebo. The researchers said that in that category, survivors are bedridden, incontinent, and require constant nursing care and attention. Adrenaline slightly improved a person's chance of survival, though, the findings showed. About 3.2% of patients given adrenaline were alive a month after the cardiac arrest, compared with only 2.4% of those who received placebo. However, this is actually, again, somewhat misleading, because although 31% of the survivors received brain damage, which is actually, a side effect of adrenaline, or can be a side effect of adrenaline. Do you know what happened to the people that didn't survive? Well, they didn't survive.
That's like, did you just answer that?
Yes. And so this is the point. What they're doing is they're trying to say that adrenaline is really, really scary. And nobody's suggesting that it's a perfect drug, right? Okay. It can cause neurological damage, and sometimes severely, like almost like as bad as having a stroke or something like that. but you die if you don't. Now, there is an argument, right, about the standard of quality life, but like I've had friends that have had strokes, neurological damage and stuff like that, but I'm glad they're still alive. So it does seem to be somewhat biased. But anyway, Wilkie then says, and I quote, anyone who calls an ambulance is at risk of being murdered with adrenaline. Kate then goes on to say that this is because it's profitable for the pharma companies, and it's worth billions. And she then highlights this by saying that it's a military-grade adrenaline gun. And we did say this in the last episode, but I'm going to repeat it. She uses that like most people use that. They say military grade as if it's like, ooh, highfalutin, finagling, right, top of the tree, high-tech shit. What military grade means is cheapest mass producible. People just misuse that phrase all the time, but anyway, whatever. The host then discovers that Teva Pharmaceuticals, who make this gun, are not only based in Israel, but Robert Maxwell was a shareholder, and the company is worth $16 billion, which basically proves it, doesn't it? I don't know what it proves, but it definitely does. Now Kate comes out with something that's at best irresponsible. She says that cancer patients don't have cancer. They have symptoms similar to cancer, but this is only due to the drugs that they're given, and that brain cancers are often actually misdiagnosed parasites. Fucking idiot. Anyway, she then goes on to say that you shouldn't just assume that it's one thing, right? But they didn't. They had a different. But this goes again. This contradicts what she said. That's why they had a differential diagnosis, so they could perform further tests. But you took her out of hospital. Where were those fucking clinics, Kate? And why was there no other treatment other than Gerson and hyperbaric chambers, which are both cancer treatments? If she didn't have cancer, and cancer isn't even a fucking thing, apparently. Kate then keeps saying that they refused an autopsy. And she thinks that this is because it would have revealed that the drugs in Paloma's system actually killed her. But she could have done a private autopsy. And this also would have proved that she didn't have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So why didn't she do that? She then claims that the Undertaker told her that there's actually no such thing as brainstem death, and they can't take organs from a cadaver. Neither of those statements are true. I'll bet the Undertaker never said that, and why would an Undertaker fucking have that knowledge in the first place? Like, it's not how things work. Now, this is interesting because, like, KS then claims that in Korea, 25 people survive heart attacks. 25% of people who have heart attacks survive them. But in the UK, it's lower. And she says that part of this is to do with waterboarding heart attack victims as part of NHS protocols. Now, what she's talking about here is that it says that if someone has a heart attack, get a cold, wet flannel and put it on their forehead. Which I think we can both agree is not exactly the same as waterboarding. Also, do you know what the survival rate for heart attacks is in the UK? She says it's less than 25%. 70%. So almost the opposite of what she said. She then goes on to basically claim that Andy was abusive and sexually assaulted her daughter. However, now this is a fuck up, right? What happened, Brent? Right, who can believe this? Kate says that when she finally convinced Paloma to report this to the police came over, but they sent a male police officer. And so Paloma decided to not tell the police officer anything, to act as if no crime had happened, essentially. That's weird, isn't it? But luckily, she had happened to have written all of this down. And so later, a written statement was sent via text to the police, which is a stroke of luck, isn't it? But also, what happened was she found these accusations apparently written in her diary, which she didn't found until after the interview with the police. And she says that when she'd found these diaries, that it was even worse than she'd suspected. But in Paloma's statement to the court, she said that she'd told her mother all about it. And later, as we'll see, Paloma did send a statement to the police, which she must have been aware of because she was living with her at the time. So why did you have to find all this out in her diary after the fact? I mean, if that's true, I suppose you could show that, although I suppose anyone could fabricate that, but whatever. But she sent an email confirming the accusations that she didn't want to make to the policeman's face. So, luckily, all the information got through. Then what happens is that the host makes Kate watch the entire Panorama show, the new one. Yeah.
Wow.
And Kate deals with it with, class and good grace. Oh, no, she doesn't. She says that her son Gabe looks fat. And then she says that she knows that Sebastian is lying because she knows all about interrogation techniques, which she doesn't. She says, I can see he's lying. It's classic FBI techniques that I know how to spot a liar. She knows fucking nothing of this. She then tells them both to pray to God. Now, she keeps going on about these diary entries, right? Okay. And she keeps saying that we know that these diaries are true because they're written in Paloma's own handwriting. In her own handwriting. This is Paloma's own words. We have her diaries in her own handwriting. Did we coerce her to do that? It's all there, Anda. All there. All in her own handwriting. Of course it's her own handwriting. It's her diary. Why would you need to bring that particular detail up? I mean, who else's handwriting would it be in Paloma's diary? The only reason that it would be anyone else's handwriting other than Paloma's would be if someone else wrote it. And you don't write something else in somebody else's diary. So it just seems like a superfluous point to make that it was in her own handwriting. I don't know. It also doesn't make sense. It's like you didn't know what happened with Anna until you read the diaries, but you'd also spoken to the police previously. Why didn't you say this to when the policeman arrived? Say, could I speak to a female police officer about this? Which you're allowed to do. I don't know. Mariana Spring comes on screen, and Kate says that she looks, her hair looks terrible. She's overweight. And that she has bad skin.
She really loves to add harms, doesn't she?
She does, doesn't she? Like, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of that statement that Paloma made.
I was going to say that letter. Yeah.
Like mother, like daughter, I suppose. That's the only possible explanation. She then starts talking about how abortion is bad. And this is, right, okay, this where we can start to do some proper actual sort of checking things. She references this film called The Silent Scream. And this is a film that shows a fetus under ultrasound screaming and thrashing around when it's aborted. And she says that everyone should go and watch this film, The Silent Scream. And this proves that abortions are dreadful, terrible, satanic things. There's a problem with this film. It's a fake. It uses special effects. Principally what it does is it does show a genuine abortion under ultrasound, but it alters the speed of the film. It speeds it up to make it look like the fetus is thrashing about in pain. And then they freeze frame on a shot of the fetus with an open mouth, and they claim that the baby is screaming. But fetuses can't scream. A 12-week-old fetus can feel no pain, and it is very, very common for them to have their mouth open. They can't scream because they're in liquid. Right? So this entire film that she brings up as her reason for thinking that abortion is real is bullshit. So she's not done with the ad homs. So basically, like, the host brings up Liz O'Riordan. Liz O'Riordan is a doctor that was on Panorama, and she's a cancer surgeon. She's the lady that was in the show with the glasses. And she, obviously, because she's on Panorama, she tweeted out that Paloma had an 85% chance of survival, and due to Kate Shemirani's Gerson therapy, she died. And the host says to Kate, well, that's defamatory, isn't it? Surely you can sue. And Kate says that, yes, she has. She's got an absolute slam dunk case of definite defamation, but she's not going to sue. Do you want to know why she's not going to sue? Kate's own words.
Go on.
Can't be arsed.
Wow.
Yeah. She also says that she knows more about cancer than this surgeon because she had cancer once, and this surgeon has never had cancer. Now, let's ignore the statement that she made literally 5 minutes ago where she said that most cancers aren't cancers and that brain cancers don't exist and stuff like that. She says that she knew more about the subject of cancer than a cancer surgeon because she had cancer once. What did she do when she had cancer? She had the tumor.
Surgery.
Yeah, she had surgery on the NHS. She then had breast implants put in on the NHS. And then she did Gerson therapy afterwards, which, as we've discussed, requires up to 5 coffee enemas a day. Like an organic juicing. Do you know what organic means?
No pesticides?
Nope. That's what most people think it means. That it's grown naturally, sort of like as the way that God and farmers intended. Do you know what organic actually means? Carbon-based. Everything's fucking organic.
Everything, yeah. What?
Yes. It's almost as if it's a marketing phrase. A weasel word that's used by people to sell sprouts.
Hold on, are you fucking kidding me
No.
right now?
No, honestly. Organic simply means carbon-based. It's a weasel word that's used by
Are
advertising.
you sure it's not like where words have 2 different meanings?
No.
Again, like
No.
what we've discussed before.
No, it has come to be known as a common parlance as an indicator that this has used less pesticides, but it's not the case. It just means carbon-based. Yeah, exactly. A pencil.
Yeah, like organic material.
Yeah.
That's just carbon-based, yeah.
I think a pencil would be described as organic. Anyway, basically, so they're going on to discuss what O'Riordan said. She says that she had an 85% chance of survival, which is actually higher than what was stated on the programme and was stated initially by our oncologist, which was 80%. Kate then says that an 80% survival rate isn't worth it because 2 out of 10 will die. Right. Now, what is a survival rate? A survival rate is the people who survive something, right? 2 out of 10 people die, right? Do you know how many people of them die without treatment? Again, 100%. 100%. So that's, again, it's so silly. It's like saying 80% isn't that good. That means that 2 out of 10 people die. Yeah, but 8 out of 10 people don't die. And if you don't have the treatment, 10 out of 10 people die. Like, also, and I don't want to be horrible here, but Paloma died. She died. Like, She also goes on to say that the survival rate of people who've had chemotherapy is reduced the longer they live because it can cause complications and stuff like that. And it's like, I hate to keep repeating this, but Paloma died. She then says that she knows someone whose child had chemo and then had years of recovery with stomach problems. It's like, yeah, fair enough. But if they didn't have the chemo, they would be dead. And then the host says, well, it's obvious, isn't it? And see if you can see the irony in this statement. This is the NHS playing God. Yeah, taking other people's health into their hands and, like, having the power of attorney and stuff. Oh, no, that wasn't the NHS, was it? Anyway. Kate then returns to the Panorama show and says that she has another important thing that she needs to get off her chest. And before the program ends, she points out that the male doctor on Panorama was also fat. So, you know,
Wow. Just wow.
yeah.